this don't look like much, but this is the River Aire. This is the start of the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, which is a backbone of northern industry. When this was built, it helped transform Britain into the workshop of the world. Churches, banners, kings and queens, factories and big machines, castles, forts and in-betweens are stories that are told. By the mid-18th century, the West Riding of Yorkshire was prospering due to their immense wool trade. Leeds alone handled 1/6 of England's trade exports, and whilst they had a lot of trade links to the east, places like York, Hull and the east coast due to the Aire and Calder Navigation Canal, there were limited links to the west, especially to the bustling seaport of Liverpool. Inspired by the success of the Bridgewater Canal in Manchester, which was the first canal in England, in 1766 a group of businessmen gathered in a pub in Bradford to discuss the creation of the canal. They had three main motivations. One was limestone. Limestone is absolutely essential for building and farming, and there needed to be a simpler, cheaper and easier way of transporting it from the quarries in North Yorkshire down to wherever it needed to be. Two was coal. Lancashire businessmen, and especially the industry in Liverpool, needed more and more coal, and they needed a cheaper supply of it, and if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of coal in Yorkshire. Three is wool. Yorkshire wool traders wanted to expand their business outwards, and so, with all this in mind, they decided to build the canal. John Longbotham was assigned the task of designing the route, and after plenty of arguments by people on both sides of the Pennines, the route was finally settled. Starting at Leeds, it would wind its way through the textile towns of West Yorkshire, then onto limestone-heavy Skipton and Gargrave, then down into Lancashire through the cotton towns of Burnley and Blackburn, down to the coal fields of Wigan, with a route to Leigh and Tarleton, before finally reaching Liverpool. At the time, it was estimated to cost around £300,000 to build the 127-mile-long canal. When it was finished 46 years later, it had cost nearly £2 million. Although when the canal started the biggest cargo was limestone, it was soon took over by something else. Coal.
Coal.
Always believe in your soul. You've got the power to know you're indestructible. Always believe it, 'cause you are
Coal.
life that you're bound to return. There's something I could have learned.
By 1860, nearly 2 million tonnes a year were being transported from the collieries in Yorkshire and Lancashire to Liverpool. So what other things were transported on the canal? Well, there was quite the variety. Slate, wool, grain, machinery, sugar, bricks and even manure, anything that could possibly be used for industry or sold in cities. Finished goods, such as clothes, would often be taken by road or rail, whereas the raw materials would be taken by canal boat. In the early days, the boats would be pulled by horses on the towpath, but by the early 20th century they began to be powered by steam. Each boat could carry around 35 to 50 tonnes, and at the busiest section of the canal, between Wigan and Liverpool, it's estimated that a boat would pass every 5 minutes. A really fantastic place to visit is the famous Bingley Five Rise Locks. It's a staircase made up of 5 levels of locks to allow the canal boats to go up and down the hill. The canal helps us to get a brief glimpse of the main industries in Yorkshire. Starting at Leeds, the wool capital, the canal follows the main textile towns of the West Riding, places like Bradford, Keighley and Bingley. The coalface covered great swathes of Yorkshire, and so some of the biggest mining areas like Sheffield, Wakefield, Castleford and Doncaster were all connected to the waterways. The steel industry, such as the famous Sheffield cutlery makers, were all aided greatly by the chance to export their goods abroad through the Liverpool ports. The limestone quarries of Skipton in the North Yorkshire Dales would provide essential lime for building and fertilising. Now obviously there was a great variety of industry and goods produced in Yorkshire, but this is just a brief guide to some of the main areas. The sheer size of the canal meant that it was the only trans-Pennine canal to successfully compete against the introduction of road and rail, and would still be used industrially well into the 1960s. Now obviously the history of the canal is vast and it's impossible to give a thorough account of it, but I hope that I've given at least a brief and interesting overview of the history of this fantastic feat of British engineering. I hope that I've inspired you to go out and walk along the towpaths, because really the canal has some of the most scenic parts of Yorkshire. I hope you've enjoyed and I hope to see you again soon.